Hello and welcome. Today, the Living with Wildlife Illinois team is hosting a question and answer session about a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service species status assessment that is currently underway. I'm Laura Kamen.
Hi, I'm Kathy Andrews Wright. Today, Joe Kath with the Illinois Department of Natural Resources Division of Natural Heritage is our guest. Joe, would you please give us some background information on yourself?
Sure. Thank you again for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Joe Kath, and I am the Endangered Species Program Manager for the IDNR's Division of Natural Heritage. I've been with the Division of Natural Heritage for 27 years. Time certainly does fly. My daily activities and responsibilities revolve around conservation, management, recovery activities for all of the threatened and endangered species within the state of Illinois. One of my areas of specialty too revolves around bats and bat conservation. I did my graduate research on bats. I also serve as the department's bat liaison, again, on all sorts of bat issues, research, conservation, management, whatnot.
Very good. Well, we're glad you could join us today, Joe.
Thank
I
you.
think probably the first thing that we need to cover is what a species status assessment is and what does it entail?
Sure. A species status assessment is a process by which the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service follows. And as you know, as our viewers know, state conservation agencies like the Department of Natural Resources and all state conservation agencies work very closely with our federal partners, especially when it comes to conservation issues, endangered species issues. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service serves as the main federal government counterpart to our state natural resource agency. So again, there's a great partnership between the state and the federal government when it comes to conservation management of imperiled species. A species status assessment is essentially a framework or an analytical approach developed by the Fish and Wildlife Service, and it's meant to deliver essentially foundational science, a foundational scientific approach for informing all decisions associated with the Federal Endangered Species Act. It allows for and welcomes engagement by state conservation partners, state conservation agencies, as well as other partners like not-for-profit organizations, say the Nature Conservancy or the Natural Land Institute or whatnot. So it's really meant to just foster a atmosphere of inclusion so that proper decisions regarding imperiled species can be made. So the SSA essentially has three components. The first component, it begins with a compilation of the best available information on a species' life history, its habitat, its taxonomy. The next step is it describes the current condition of the species habitat, its demographics, and probable explanations for past and ongoing changes in the overall species abundance, its distribution, across North America or across its natural range. And then last, an SSA forecasts a species response to future scenarios, future environmental conditions, future conservation efforts. So it starts with the basics and then morphs into, okay, if XYZ happens in the future, how do we predict the species is going to respond to that? And an SSA is founded on the principles of what's known as the 3 R's. And those 3 R's are resiliency, redundancy, and representation. Okay, what does that mean? Resiliency is a species' ability to adapt to a random environmental event. Will it survive? Will it do better? Will it do worse? Redundancy is a species' ability to adapt or withstand a catastrophic event. How many animals will survive? What is the probability of extinction because of this catastrophic event? And then finally, representation is a species' ability to adapt to overall changing environmental conditions over a very long period of time. So SSA founded on the principles of the 3 R's. A lot of acronyms, but essentially that leads to a decision document or decision-making document that allows administrator scientists to make the best decisions for overall conservation, management, and recovery of imperiled species across North America.
Well, thank you, Joe, for providing us with that overview about the species status assessment. And I understand that you're on a current assessment team that's reviewing the status of 3 different bats, all of which are native to Illinois. Can you please provide us some information on those bats?
In 2020, the Fish and Wildlife Service decided to implement a formal species status assessment for 3 species of bats. These bats are the little brown bat, the tricolored bat, and the northern long-eared bat. And the primary reason for starting this SSA on these 3 bat species was tied to the just catastrophic detrimental effects on white nose syndrome that white nose syndrome has. And if you remember from our past discussions on what white nose syndrome is and the 3 hardest hit species from white nose, these happen to be the 3 hardest species that are hit by white nose. All of these species are endemic, native to Illinois, and they all hibernate in Illinois. So many Midwestern states have a great stake at participating in this SSA and helping guide future decisions. I was very fortunate enough to be asked to be on the SSA technical team for these bats. So we're moving forward with a lot of our initial analyses to help guide an ultimate SSA document.
So Joe, what are the probable next steps that are going to take place once the status assessment is completed for these bats?
Sure. There is, with any species status assessment, there's a rigorous timeline that's determined before the SSA starts as far as when a preliminary report will be provided to the overall technical team for their review of that report so that comments can be made internally within the technical players within that technical team. That initial draft report is scheduled to come out this summer, in summer of 2021. We seem to be on schedule, so I think we're going to meet that deadline. And then a final report that will be distributed via the Federal Register so that everyone can see that final report, so the general public can access that, is scheduled for late summer of 2022. So we're on schedule, but as you can see, an SSA does take time, and it takes time because we want to make sure the science is right and that proper decisions are being made. So this SSA again is focusing on 3 bat species: the little brown bat, the northern long-eared bat, and the tricolored bat. Each of these bats has a different, more or less, outcome per the SSA. The SSA for the little brown bat, or the component involving the little brown bat, the SSA is hoping to answer the question, does the little brown bat actually warrant listing under the Federal Endangered Species Act? Are its conditions so dire that it actually does warrant listing as either federally endangered or federally threatened? We'll get there and we'll figure that out. For the northern long-eared bat, the species status assessment is going to help aid in a 5-year status review of the animal, how it's done over the last 5 years, and will also aid in constructing and refining a formal recovery plan for that animal. It is already listed at the federal level, yet a final recovery plan still has to be developed and ultimately implemented. So the SSA is going to help with that. For the tricolored bat, it's similar to the little brown bat in that the SSA is going to help to determine whether the species is warranted protection under the Federal Endangered Species Act, whether it's actually doing better than we thought and it doesn't warrant protection, or it may warrant protection, but there are other listing priority actions that are taking a higher priority at this time, and it will essentially be put into the queue and addressed at a later time. So ultimately, if you want to break down the SSA for these 3 bats in one purpose or one goal is, are these bats doing, is the status of these bats, or are the status of these bats so poor that they actually warrant more protection or ultimate protection under the Federal Endangered Species Act? That's the question that really the SSA team is facing at this time. There are 2 ways we're going about that. We are analyzing both winter hibernation data of these animals, long-term trends in hibernation patterns of these animals, where these animals are hibernating, what is the rate of decline at these hibernation sites due to white nose. Some sites are showing massive mortality due to white nose, others not as much. So we have a winter component, and we also have a summer component for these animals as well. Are areas where these animals are known to roost and form maternity colonies in the summer. Have we seen long-term trends in maternity colony distribution across the landscape, say over the past 5 or 10 years? Have maternity colonies decreased? Are we not finding as many? Is the ultimate reproduction of these animals somehow being affected, where normal patterns of offspring are being interrupted somehow? So we're taking both into account winter factors and summer factors that are being put into this SSA and being analyzed in a much deeper fashion.
Well, thanks, Joe, for joining us today and sharing information about your work assessing the status of the little brown bat, the tricolored bat, and the northern long-eared bat. For our viewers, if you want more information about bats, or particularly white nose syndrome in bats, we hope that you'll check out the video that Joe sat down with us to talk about white nose syndrome. And if you have other questions about other Illinois wildlife or suggestions for future videos, please send them in through the Wildlife Illinois website. Until then.